This wedding was an assignment for my Religion 2 class in Catholic school.
This one's wife, jam and dog biscuits. A message to Catherine? Hello, I'm hgtudor. Trooping the Colour, a major event in the royal calendar loomed. This one's wife was not invited. As you should know by now, the failure to invite the narcissist wounds the narcissist. This is because the act itself contains no fuel for the narcissist, and it doesn't involve the narcissist when the narcissist believes they ought to be involved. Irrespective of the fact that this one's wife is not a working member of the royal family and therefore logically would not be a consideration for an invitation, furthermore, the strained relationships between her, to put it mildly, and the royal family, alongside her behaviour towards them, would also mean that one ordinarily would not expect to be invited. Yet, the presumptive nature of the narcissist, the access all areas mentality that is encapsulated by the grasping entitled behaviour of this one's wife, means that she would have expected to be invited, believed that she should have been invited. The failure to invite her wounds her. It ignites her heated fury. We didn't get to see that, but believe me, the fact that that event was looming and that she was not invited will have caused an ignition of fury wherever she was. But matters got worse, didn't they? Not only was she not involved in a major royal event, which would garner attention from around the world, but all of a sudden came the news that the nemesis would be attending. Horrors upon horrors. It just got triply worse for this one's wife. After relishing the bullying of Catherine online, this one's wife was faced with the fact that Catherine would be making a triumphant return to public appearance and that threatened to break the internet. This was a worst-case scenario for this one's wife, and it essentially was sprung on her at short notice. The confirmation that Catherine would be attending Trooping the Colour was only announced the day before, and therefore, as it rang out across the media, and this one's wife would have been well aware of it, it would have caused a further ignition of fury. I've explained elsewhere that in order to address this, it was necessary for her to do something to try and upstage. We have seen on so many other occasions it was necessary for her to upstage. I detailed some of those occasions in the video about Mission Upstage. And thus she attempted to do so with her piss-poor effort of jam and dog biscuits. It has been suggested that, aside from this being an attempt to upstage Catherine, albeit a ham-fisted one, that there was something else about it. It is abundantly clear that this was an attempt to upstage Catherine. The timing of it spoke volumes. The fact that this one's wife is a narcissist means she can't stand for the spotlight to be on somebody else, particularly the nemesis. And therefore she has to do something, anything, to try and bring the attention back onto her, even if it's a piss-poor effort. Those of you who have been involved with narcissists will be fully familiar with this behaviour. A sudden tantrum at an inappropriate moment, spoiling the occasion, lashing out when everything seems to be okay, sitting calmly on a Sunday afternoon having a nice lunch, and an argument comes out of nowhere, and you don't understand why, And it's simply because the narcissist's sense of control has somehow been threatened. Perhaps it's because you're watching television and not talking to them. Perhaps it's because you're on the phone to a friend and not dealing with the narcissist. And what was a hitherto calm and relaxed occasion suddenly becomes chaotic and stressful. The narcissist will use whatever is at hand to try and bring attention back onto them. And it's not always particularly subtle in the way that it's done. It's often something that doesn't really make sense either. I've often explained the example of where one of my clients went away, was looking after his children while the narcissist was away for the weekend. He cleaned the house from top to bottom, did all the shopping, looked after the children, did all the laundry, and the only thing that his wife said on her return was, "Why have you washed the towels?" He couldn't understand why she said that. It didn't make sense. Was she suggesting that he'd done something despicable to said towels? No. By being able to look after the children, clean the house, do the shopping, do all of the laundry, he demonstrated that he was perfectly able to function without her. It made her feel unimportant. And therefore, in the circumstances, that meant that her narcissism was screaming, do something to be relevant, do something to be important, get the attention back onto you. And all it could do, for she was a middle lesser, was suggest that there was something unsavoury behind him washing of the towels. To him it made no sense. In narc world, it makes perfect sense. It worked. He responded to it. Thus, control came back to her. She received fuel. It wasn't particularly complex. It wasn't particularly unique what she did. But it worked. And it's similar with this one's wife. We've seen so many occasions her lack of subtlety in what she does. Elbowing people out of the way, pushing in front of Harry, hugging somebody when Harry's shaking hands with them, barging in front of Harry, trying to take the microphone, speaking over people, wearing clothing that's grossly inappropriate. Subtle is not something that this one's wife engages in. She's often utilising the sledgehammer to crack a nut approach, sharpening the elbows and getting in front of everybody, positioning herself in the centre, not allowing people into the photograph, snatching gifts away. She's fairly rudimentary with regard to many of her manipulations. Thus, it was entirely necessary for her narcissism to scramble to do something to try and bring the attention back onto her, no matter how cack-handed and ham-fisted it might have been. The intent was, bring attention back onto me through whatever needs to be done. And remember, as I explained in a video of yesterday, that's all, folks, that she continues towards obscurity because she really doesn't have much left in the locker with regard to trying to usurp attention. The stunt involving the biscuits and the jam demonstrates that. It has been suggested that this stunt was also for the purposes of conveying a message to Catherine. You can make your own minds up about that particular proposition. But let us consider that if it were the case that this one's wife undertook the dog biscuits and jam stunt as 1, an attempt to steal the attention away from Catherine, and 2, to send a message to her, was she successful in that regard? First of all, did she remove the attention? The short answer is no. She gained coverage. There was mention of it at the time, and there has been amplification of that, which I shall be addressing in a separate video, as more news outlets have been commenting upon the jam and dog biscuits scenario, if we can call it that. It certainly was spoken about in videos and talked about on social media. Thus, fuel was provided to this one's wife. So it generated a lot of fuel for her, primarily from non-intimate tertiary sources, so not particularly potent, but there was a lot of chatter about it, which meant that ultimately there was a reasonable amount of fuel available to her as a consequence of the number of people that were talking about her, and to the extent that she looked at what was being said about her, she would gather that fuel. Much of it, of course, was challenge fuel, because, as usual, because of her unpopularity, a lot of it was ridiculing her. Accordingly, she gained some fuel from it, albeit it threatened her sense of control. Did she manage to upstage Catherine? No, she did not. The coverage of Catherine was wall to wall. It was praiseworthy with regard to calling her a trooper, commenting about how elegant she looked, how coordinated she was with the children, how delightful it was to see her. It was a resounding victory for Catherine and an abject failure on the part of this one's wife with regard to attempting to upstage Catherine. Yes, she was talked about, but it didn't wrench the spotlight away from Catherine to any great degree. But she had to try. She had to try because her narcissism demanded it. She would have been better served ignoring the day, not reacting at all, and asserting control by staying in a position of withdrawal. That is what a more evolved narcissist would have done, basically make it look like they didn't care. She, of course, shows that she does, in the sense that it gets to her. Her response of publicising the dog biscuits and the jam demonstrates that the absence from Trooping the Colour and the reappearance of Catherine really gets to her. It does, and I explained as such in the Monty Shit Show meltdown video of yesterday. Thus, it was necessary for her narcissism to respond. It had to respond to these huge threats to control, and once again it demonstrated how her brand of narcissism really isn't suitable for the position that she's got herself into, because it just resulted in more ridicule. Thus, with regard to the stated intention of nullifying the threat to control by virtue of upstaging, she failed. She will have ultimately got the control because of the complaints that she will have made to her coterie, who will have agreed about Catherine not looking nice and Catherine being self-centred and their usual spiteful comments. As you know, the narcissist always gets control, but in terms of also trying to cause a problem for Catherine and wrenching that spotlight away from her, she failed in that regard. What about the suggestion that she was seeking to send a message to Catherine also? Well, if that is correct, that failed as well. Why? Because the Princess of Wales has a total no-contact regime when it comes to this one's wife. It has its own project name within her household, and the purpose of it is to ensure that she is no longer affected by the abusive behaviour of this one's wife. It is to ensure that she rips out this one's wife from her life, root and stem, so that there can be no more anguish, anger, irritation at her behaviour. This means that, save in the most extreme of circumstances, she will not be physically present when this one's wife is, given the fact that they're both in separate countries and that one's a working member of the royal family, albeit on temporary leave, so to speak, and the other wants to be a celebrity. The likelihood of the two women being together physically is highly unlikely, but nevertheless, this is part of that total no-contact regime. There must be no communication. This one's wife has no direct means of getting in touch with the Princess of Wales. She is unlikely to try because her narcissism will recognise that she will be rebuffed, but in any event, any communications that might be sent by her will be intercepted and, are not even to be brought to the attention of the Princess of Wales, so that she doesn't even know that in the unlikely event that this one's wife has hoovered, she doesn't get to hear about it. She is shielded from it. The Princess of Wales pays no regard to what this one's wife does. She does not, unlike the other way around, watch what this one's wife does. It used to be the case that some attention was given to her activities, but the Princess of Wales has now understood that the most appropriate way of dealing with her is to make her persona non grata. To have no consideration of what she's doing, to not watch what she's doing, to not pay regard to what she might be saying about other people, never to look at the social media, never to look at the mainstream media in relation to her, to ensure that nobody brings it to her attention, and instead the attention is focused elsewhere. And of course, given her recent health complications, the Princess of Wales has much more important matters to focus on than what this one's wife is doing. It is, of course, often tempting to watch your enemy. It's often tempting, particularly, to watch them as they start to implode and make mistakes. But it's all part of that total no-contact regime and the multiple benefits that come with it, as I've explained in other videos, that you avoid such temptation. It is also the case that there is a blanket ban on discussing this one's wife and Harry in that household. They are not to be mentioned. This is all part of ensuring that the anger, the irritation, the hurt that is associated with the duplicitous duo doesn't manifest. And steps are taken to ensure that no thoughts are given in relation to this one's wife. Thus, if there was a coded message that was sent in relation to the jam and dog biscuits, it completely failed because the Princess of Wales will not be aware of it. Those around her have created a ring of steel, whereby information about this one's wife is not allowed to pass to the Princess of Wales. She is not to be mentioned. It is to be filtered out. It is to be removed. Those that support are aware of some of the things that this one wife does. But that information is never to reach the eyes or ears of the Princess of Wales. And thus, if there was a tawdry message associated with the presentation of the jam and dog biscuits on social media by Nacho Figueras, besides the main necessity of trying to upstage Catherine simply would not have known about it, because she wouldn't have seen it, and nor would it have been brought to her attention. And thus, there is a failure on that potential front also. Thus, the execution of this total no-contact regime has been paying dividends for the Princess of Wales, as it pays dividends for anybody that is involved with a narcissist. It is the counsel of perfection for how you deal with a narcissist, and my work sets out in considerable detail how you can implement that no-contact regime, why you should implement that no-contact regime, and those who have done so and have applied what I've told them to do will be able to testify to the multiple benefits that come from it. The Princess of Wales is in a similar position. Having taken that decision to purge this one's wife from her life, it is all the better. And the consequence is that no matter how much this one's wife might stamp her cloven hooves trying to get the attention of the nemesis, and believe me, she's desperate to get a reaction from Catherine, it will not come. I'm HG Tudor. Thank you for listening.